Now I recognize my friend Mr. Crow again for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Dr. Mukhopadhyay, I would like to go back to you. You earlier were trying to provide some additional context around the issue of the drawdown and the troop number. And I would love to hear you finish that line of thinking, because I think the context around that and what was going on politically and within Afghanistan and the months and years leading up to that is very important here.
Thank you, Congressman. Yes, actually, in 2019, I wrote a piece for Lawfare in which I talked about, as the debate was happening around what the troop numbers should be, and it was very contentious, as you'll no doubt recall, I was of the view, as General Sadat explained, that Afghan forces were doing the bulk of the fighting. So really what was significant about our troop presence, in addition to all of the support that contractors provided, was the political import of the troop presence. Because the political import, for me, was a signal on the part of the Americans to Afghan elites, to soldiers and citizens, and to the Taliban, and to the neighbors, that the U.S. government had confidence in and an investment in the Republic. And so the question of how to end the war, I think we all know that Republicans and Democrats agreed the war needed to come to an end. The question was how to do that responsibly. And the reason that I keep coming back to the Doha Agreement, but really it's not just the Doha Agreement, right? It's starting with the negotiations that began by President Trump in 2018, was that set of negotiations signaled to the Afghan government, to the Taliban, to the Afghan people, that in fact the US government no longer had confidence in and an investment in the Republic. And I think it's important to say, when we keep zeroing in on April 2021, that as Mr. Roggio's own data shows, that only 129 of the 407 districts in Afghanistan at that time were fully controlled by the government, right? This was a process of the Taliban recognizing that it was winning, and the Afghan government being in a position to never be quite clear, to be able to predict what is going to happen, because President Trump raised the number of troops, then dropped the number of troops, then changed his mind, then signed the agreement, then dropped the number below what the commitment actually was to the Taliban. And I can tell you that even after the April 21 announcement, I was in Kabul in June 21, and it was very clear to me that senior members of the Afghan government did not believe that the Americans were going to leave. And I don't think that we can attribute that to President Biden's decision. It was a much longer pattern of feeling a sense simultaneously, on the one hand, as General Sadat said, that we would never abandon them, and on the other hand, a sense that at any moment we might abandon them. And that unpredictability was most acute in the Trump period. And there's plenty of blame to go across, as I said in my opening comments, across all four administrations. But that kind of unpredictability around troop numbers created a sort of political instability in Afghanistan that I don't think, that was a domino effect after February 2020 that I don't think we could have reversed.
Thank you for that. General Sadat, to you for a moment. This is not a trick question. I have no idea the answer to it. I'm really curious your thought on this. Is there an amount of time that after 20 years, more than 20 years, well, about 20 years, that the U.S. could have kept troops there, but then the Afghan forces could have stood on their own, and then we could have gone to zero? Do you have that number in your head? Because, I mean, we had been talking, we tried all the different levels, as Mr. Roggio said, all the different levels, all the different surge strategies, all different tactics. I mean, we tried so many different things. I'm just wondering if there's an amount of time in your head that if you had just had, X more years, that the outcome would have been different.
it wouldn't have been about the years, it was about the approach. I think, to be honest, we have to go back a little bit on negotiations. Negotiations with Taliban started in 2011 when they opened an official office in Doha. It was during President Obama, pulling out 5 detainees out of the prison, and the next day giving them a political stature globally. I think if that didn't begin, the Americans negotiated with Afghan government directly about your leaving, our country wouldn't have collapsed. In case that we continue to receive the amount of support in terms of military and combat from the US. I think what killed us, sir, that we could never recover was the fact that the US government went behind our back and spoke to our enemy, made a deal with our enemy, making us look like we're the outsiders, and the real deal is with the Taliban. I think without the United States government talking to the Taliban, the Afghan government would have absolutely not only sustained, but we would actually succeed because of the reasons I just mentioned. The younger generation of Afghans, you fought and worked with Afghan military. Now, we raised through the ranks. And 20 years was the time we grew up in politics and military. I have a young colonel here, Colonel Parwani. He's not even 30 years old, but he was leading vicious wars in Kunduz, in Kandahar, and in Helmand. So they became more sophisticated, more capable. I believe it would have been, look, Afghanistan became a political toy a little bit. When President Bush was in charge, that was the best chance for Afghanistan. We appreciate, we honor President Bush. He listened to Afghans. He worked with the Afghans. When President Obama came, President Obama and President Karzai had bad relationship between each other, so it affected us. Then President Biden, back then Vice President, came and fought with our president, and their relationship became strained. It further affected us. I sometimes feel like President Biden has a vendetta against Afghans. The way he comments on us, the way he treats Afghans. And on the other, couple of months ago, he wanted to give our money to 9/11 victims. And some of these things, look, we are a nation. We're a great nation. Our people are very proud people. We are the most loyal people that you can find if you become our allies. If you become our enemies, we will fight to our death. We're not just going to disappear tomorrow. We will rise again. We will get rid of the Taliban. And we hope that we can do it together with you. And it will be good for you to have a friend, to have an ally in that part of the world. We will take care of your interests as well, as long as you gave us some support. Things have happened, awful things, bad things, but I'm asking humbly this Congress, please, let's focus on what we can do together in the future.
Thank you, General.